Bill is the co-founder of 350.org, and Bill has built the first global grassroots climate movement of ordinary people working to build a world powered by clean, accessible, and affordable renewable energy. So, Bill, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to ask you a few questions about your leadership of 350 as a global movement, especially during its early middle days. So, yeah, Bill, can you tell us what was key to 350's approach to getting people from so many walks of life excited about the same goal and understanding the goal in the same way and getting excited about it?
350.org, when it formed, had the great advantage of being there being a kind of unfilled ecological niche. It was the first attempt at a kind of global climate grassroots movement. So when we had our first big day of action in 2009, we were able to coordinate 5,200 simultaneous demonstrations in 181 countries. There were just people everywhere eager for the chance to do some work. And the secret, I think, if there was one, was that we were very much doing what we would call open source organizing. I would call a potluck supper almost. We set the date and the theme, and everybody brought their best stuff. And the attempts to control it were very small, to non-existent. We just handed out the logo and the idea to anybody who was doing anything, and it worked just fine. And our effort at first was just to let people know that there were other people around the world who felt the way they did. So the key to our work was Facebook and Twitter and things weren't yet real, but there was a photo sharing app called Flickr. And every place anybody was doing a demonstration, we would have them upload video immediately, and then it would share it with everybody else, to sort of let them feel like a part of a big movement. And in a kind of literal sense, we took over Times Square on that first day. We took the billboards that are normally showing whiskey ads and things, and we just started pumping these photos onto them one after another. And then we would take photos of those photos and send them back to Kenya or Peru and say, look, here you are, 40-foot tall in Times Square. You're a big part of a big movement. So at the beginning, it was a lot about just allowing people to feel like there was momentum.
Very cool. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Bill. And I would love to dive a little bit deeper on one part of this. So you said that everybody pretty much acted in the way that they could, whatever made sense for them. Can you say a little bit more about how you are approaching kind of balancing the autonomy of movement organizers versus staying aligned on the goals and key parameters of it?
Well, so our our odd name was chosen for two reasons. One, Arabic numerals work better than English words in translation around the world. So 350 was meant the same thing everywhere. And two, it became the kind of defining notion. What we were saying was what the scientists were saying. 350 parts per million CO2 was the most you could have in the atmosphere. And we were above that already. So people around the world did things like spell out 350 with their bodies on beaches, on mountaintops, so on and so forth. Everybody who wrote a story about it, took a picture of it, whatever, they had to explain this basic piece of physics and help people understand that we were past where we were supposed to be. It's not very complicated. Everybody understands the concept of too much. And so that was enough of a cohesive message, at least at the beginning, to keep everybody on the same page.
Very cool. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. How were you approaching attracting, cultivating, training, retaining movement leaders that were really doing the action here and stepping up?
Well, I mean, at first, when we were recruiting, when we were sort of getting people, we were just sort of, there were 7 college students from the US, and there are 7 continents, and each one took one and just kind of fanned out around the world, finding people who were kind of interested. I mean, and for the most part, not everywhere were there somebody who was a climate activist, but everywhere there was someone who was worried about development, about women's rights, about peace, about all the things we're not going to have on a overheated planet. And those people became natural allies, place after place after place. Once we'd been doing this for a while, people made very systematic efforts at leadership development. We did a thing called Global Power Shift. The first one was in Turkey, where we had 400 young leaders from around the world there for 4 or 5 days, learning from each other, um, just learning how to do this work, and that kind of thing has gone on ever since. Now I've left 350 in better hands than mine and gone on to start Third Act, which organizes old people like me, people over 60, and we do the same kind of things. We're doing a big online training with hundreds and hundreds of people this afternoon. Just, organizing, movement building is a relatively new thing. It was only in the 20th century, under the leadership of people like Gandhi and Dr. King and a million other women and men whose names we don't know, that we kind of developed this technology for how the small and the many can stand up to the mighty and the few. We don't have systematic, there's no West Point for nonviolent movement building. So we kind of make it up as we go along. But now there's enough known about best practices and how to get stuff done and things that it really is important and fun to do a lot of that kind of training work.
Very cool. And I'm curious, what did that look like operationally to training these movement leaders? Do you tell people like, here's a training session, come join? Or do you reach out to people proactively and say, you look like a leader, let us help you?
Yep. Some of each. When we were doing those power shift things, we of course had to raise a lot of money to bring,
Mhm.
hundreds of people from hundreds of places across, mostly across the global South, to one central location and work. So, people nominated themselves or nominated other people, that kind of thing. But in much more informal and kind of daily ways, um, we're just setting up opportunities all the time for people to learn how to.
Mhm.
There's something intimidating for people about the idea that they have to go be an organizer, But it turns out that actually this is a skill set that all human beings uh, are suited for. I'm a deep introvert, and if I can learn to do some of this, then most people are. It's much easier,
Mhm.
So we find it really, really we find it really fun to introduce people to this new part of themselves.
Mhm. And did you do anything in particular to help people see their agency as a potential organizer? Like I know that a lot of people indeed can be shy about it. So how did you help them see that actually I really could do this?
I don't know. I mean, I actually think that you mostly learn stuff by doing things. And so we've just had endless campaigns, that everybody's and since if 350 had a one kind of organizing innovation, it was this idea that the internet had advanced to the point where we could do these massively distributed actions. We could do 5,000 things at the same time. And we were really, I think, about the first people to try that sort of thing. And that means that most of those things are going to be pretty small. It's not like the March on Washington or something. And that allows lots and lots and lots of people to get some good organizing chops.
Mhm. Yeah, makes sense. And I wonder also about the aspect of accountability of movement leaders. Did you have to in any way keep people accountable to doing the work they sign up they would do as organizers, or was it all organic and they would just either do it or not do it, but it added up anyways?
Our our experience has been, my experience has been, uh, you can put a great deal of trust in people.
Mhm.
I think the test for that really has been like with 350, like we had a logo and it was a good one, beautiful one. And we just said, take it, use it, which would have been impossibly scary for, the World Wildlife Fund doesn't like it if you take a panda and stick it on something. That's their logo, and they're rightly worried, I guess, that someone might do something bad with it or, damage their thing or whatever. We just decided not to worry about that, just to let people. And I think 350 is organized by now. We've say 20,000 demonstrations in every country on earth except North Korea. And really, there's never been a problem. So, which is weird in this kind of era of trolling and whatever. And, you know, I probably should knock on wood. Um, but um, I think there's a good deal to be said for trusting the people around you.
Makes sense. Thank you. And can you say now a little bit about how did you resource this work? So what parts of this actually need to be funded versus can be catered on with volunteers, and how did you sell it to funders?
You need a central staff of some kind in order to, you know, make volunteers um, as productive as possible. I've always been a volunteer in this work, but I've always known that we've needed a small core of people who were, you know, going to make sure that the website was up, that you know, we're in contact with people, we're developing materials, so on and so forth. But I think the key for organizations like this is to see themselves in the role of, above all, empowering their volunteers.
Mhm.
Um, and that I think is you know, the danger becomes if things become too staff centric, and those of us on the center of things begin to think of ourselves as the organization instead of as a kind of apparatus to help make the organization work as well as it can.
Mhm.
And the reason that becomes much less of a problem when you're actively engaged in campaigns. When you're in the middle of a fight, my experience is everybody figures out, you know, just it's when you're in between fights, um, and you know, and if you know, people decide that it's time to have a lot of time to sit around and think about uh, theories of change and strategies and you know, on and on and on. That sometimes I begin to worry because it's harder to distribute that work and stuff widely.
Mhm. And in terms of selling this to funders, I'm for the stuff that you did
I'm
need.
terrible at it. The stuff we do is, you know, difficult for funders to get their head around because they like usually a certain kind of
Mhm.
more centralized control of things.
Mhm.
Um, and and you know, uh, uh, also I think that the metrics that funders care the most about generally aren't the right metrics.
Mhm.
Um, in the end, on really huge scale questions like climate change, yes, you're fighting to stop particular pipelines or to pass a piece of particular legislation or whatever the fight is. But the larger, more important fight that all of that feeds into is the fight to change the zeitgeist, um, to change the society's sense of what's normal and natural and obvious.
Mhm.
And if you can get that done, you know, that's what all those other things, if you can get that done, it makes all those other things easier. They feed into allowing you to change the zeitgeist. And then as that zeitgeist shifts, the next set of battles get much simpler. So to me, that's generally where I'm aiming, but that's hard to explain to, you know, to get
Mhm.
funders who have, you know, a sense of why that's crucial.
Yeah, it's really remarkable, by the way, that it seems that conservative funders get it and are incredibly effective at this.
Yes, there's something to that. I also do think that there's something to be said for the idea that um, designing things so that they're less expensive to do
Mhm.
is a good idea.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't like to the degree that one cannot be beholden to funders and things. I think that's good, and I think that it also, I, I think that there's a sense in which activism can become over professionalized. And lose some of the I think things work best when there's a slightly homemade vibe that runs through all the work that one is doing.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you're not good at things and professional and you know, but that there's that there I I haven't found, I mean, at least beyond a certain point, I don't think more resources necessarily end up making more impact.
Yeah.
I'll jump in and just share that I'm your like official facilitator for this room. It's very flowing. Please jump in with any questions that you have for Bill. I'll give you all a 2-minute warning just so that if you have a last minute question, we can do a quick lightning round before we adjourn. Does anyone have a question to start us off with? If you need some time, I can also, okay, great, we've got hands. Marco, please go first.
No, ladies first, sorry, go.
No, no, okay. Thanks. So my question is, a lot of the time in this space, we think about, we think within our limits, and I like, Bill, a lot of your work has been about like, you know, just like swinging big. So my question is, if like Work on Climate had unlimited funds and unlimited power, like, or even in your own work, what would we do? Like, what would, if we weren't limited, what would be our smart move?
So I think that the key to not being limited is to build coalitions. And I'll tell you about the thing that we're about to launch, because it is a big swing, and we need everybody engaged. So I'll tell you about it. You guys can react and figure out. Clearly, we're screwed right now in America. Things are extremely bad. You know, we're going to have to play an endless amount of defense just to try and save a little bit of what Biden and et al. Got done, whatever. We're all in the middle of doing that. We're organizing big demonstrations on April 5th all over the country with Indivisible and on and on. But we also, I think, need to play some serious offense here. And I think we have some room to do it. The vulnerability of the other side on this stuff is the almost unbelievable story of how fast and how far the price of renewable energy has fallen. And I don't think that we've done a very good job of getting that across. We still talk about alternative energy as if sun and wind were the kind of whole foods of energy, you know, nice but pricey, when in fact, they're now the Costco of energy. They're the cheap stuff available in bulk. We live on a planet where the by far most inexpensive way to produce power is to point a sheet of glass at the sun. So we're going to do this big day of action on the weekend of September 20th and 21st across the country, which will officially launch in a few weeks, that we're calling Sun Day. Not Earth Day, but Sun Day. And it's going to be, in many ways, a day to just kind of celebrate, get angry, set out the possibilities for change. We're working, you know, with all kinds of groups. Green Faith is doing lots of services. Protect Our Winters has lots of people who know how to climb things. So we're going to get them up buildings with solar panels, doing guerrilla installations, you know, people doing parades of e-bikes, on and on and on. The point is, it should be broad enough for absolutely everybody to figure out some ways to play a role here, and to try and excite people with the idea that, you know, we have a possibility here for a group project, the likes of which we haven't seen since the Apollo missions, you know, except this time, instead of putting two guys on a different planet, we have to bring our local star down close to Earth to power this one. So it's a kind of classic example of swinging big. That's entirely reliant on everybody figuring out that this would be fun and exciting and interesting, and how they can, you know, bring their best stuff to the game. So to me, that's, to me, I used one metaphor before of a potluck supper, which is very true. But another is, you guys are probably too young to have ever read the book, the classic American book, Tom Sawyer. But in Mark Twain's Tom Sawyer, at one point, Tom's aunt orders him to go out and whitewash the fence in front of the house. And this is a chore he does not want to do. So he pretends to have so much fun doing it for a few minutes that all the other boys in town immediately show up and want to get, in fact, he charges them a nickel apiece for the right to, you know, go and whitewash their section of the fence. That's kind of how, at some level, this kind of organizing works. We really need it to be appealing enough that everybody wants to jump in. And it obviously doesn't need to become the main thing that everybody's doing, but I do think that movements work best when we all have particular projects we're working on, but then we're able to come together on occasion for really important things. I'll just end by saying, I was talking about zeitgeist before. The first Earth Day in 1970 put 20 million Americans in the street. That was 10% of the then population of the US. And that was enough within 18 months to get a corrupt Republican administration to give us the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the EPA, on and on and on. Figuring out ways to mobilize people in numbers with spirit and creativity is fun. and potentially powerful. So go to, you all could do me a favor and go to the sort of placeholder website we've got at the moment at sunday.earth, and just now or over time, give me your sense of things we should be doing.
And Marco, you had a question as well, right?
Yes, so in a second, while I still write all my notes down from that drop. Yeah, so I actually read the Tom Sawyer book and I love it. It's like maybe that maybe I'm closer to your generation, Bill, than I am to other people who usually listen to you. I was like, oh, do I feel old now or do I feel wise? I don't know. I'll pick the former. Okay, my question is, so you're doing really cool stuff. You're getting a lot of people to maybe change what they've previously doing or join one of the causes and change their behaviors. Like, this is what I'm going to maybe go on a protest, maybe do something, put a lot of energy into it. What are some of the obstacles where you're like, these are the things I always say, and here's how we help people overcome that? And I ask that because I'm dealing with a lot of people who are very experienced, some are privileged, some have a lot of resources behind them, but they need a little bit of motivation push to go over that hurdle, be like, oh, no, I can actually provide impact here. And this is, I want this, but it's also scary a little bit. So
I think
how
the
do you
biggest
work through that?
obstacle, I think the biggest obstacle, and this is more for perhaps for Americans than others, because our default is to individualism in a way that other places aren't. The biggest obstacle is people sense that 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 they need to do this by themselves. If they're thinking about climate change, their first question is, what do I put on my roof or in my garage? You know, so on and so forth. And it takes a little while to try and explain to people that the most important thing an individual can do right now is be a little less of an individual and join together with others in movements, coalitions large enough to have some chance of affecting the basic ground rules here. But I think people are, start to understand that more. And as they do, it gets easier to build the kind of scale of movements that we need.
Just a quick time check. We've got 2 minutes left. A question for you also, Bill. What I noticed in the 3 presenters today was just like incredible caretaking of the movements that you all were building. It was caretaking of yourselves and each other and the structures, and so much time and energy. As Work on Climate thinks about their strategy, which involves this like really beautiful community of tens of thousands of people they've already formed, what advice do you have for them about caretaking of the community that they have, and how to usher that community into the next evolution?
I don't have any particularly great advice, I don't think, but I do think all this stuff works easier when people bring a real sense of humor to the whole thing. I think self-seriousness is, I mean, we're talking about the most serious questions in the world. And so, it leads you in that direction, but it's self-seriousness is a real trap. And the more kind of light you can figure out how to make things, the more work will get done, is my general sense of things.